The sound of porcelain breaking against my cheek was louder than the laughter that followed. For a split second, I thought my skull had cracked. My vision blurred, warm blood rolled down my face, and all I could hear was Harper's giggle slicing through the air like glass. "Look at her!" Mason slapped the table, wheezing between his laughs. "Can't even take a joke without bleeding all over Mom's good floor." Mom didn't even flinch. She stood there holding the broken edge of the plate like it was a weapon she'd been dying to use. "Maybe," she said, slowly, venom dripping from every word, "you'll finally learn to keep that useless mouth shut." Dad leaned back in his chair, swirling his whiskey lazily as though I was a stain on his evening. "You've always been dead weight," he muttered, shaking his head. "We carried you long enough. Be grateful we even let you sit at this table. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video." I pressed a napkin against my face, trying to stop the blood, but Harper yanked it away with a smirk. "Don't ruin the linen, Jamie," she said sweetly. "Mom actually likes those." Mason burst out laughing again. "Worthless! Absolutely worthless! You should have been left at the hospital." Their voices were sharp, but what cut deeper was the silence around me, the way everyone else in the room, aunts, uncles, neighbors, just sat there pretending nothing was wrong, sipping their wine and laughing at someone's joke like I wasn't standing there bleeding. Something inside me cracked that night, but it wasn't just bone. It was the last thread of hope I'd been holding on to, the fantasy that, if I worked hard enough, loved them enough, I'd finally matter. I stopped crying that moment. I stopped needing them. And for the first time I saw them clearly, parasites feeding on their golden image, desperate to look flawless while rotting underneath. I decided then I wouldn't just leave. I wouldn't just survive. I'd burn down the pedestal they built themselves on. I spent the next 2 months playing the part perfectly. I lowered my voice, avoided their eyes, and nodded whenever they called me a burden. To them, I became invisible, someone broken and beaten, incapable of standing up for myself. Which was exactly what I wanted them to believe. But in the background, I was building something. I started small, collecting little pieces. Harper's perfect influencer photos that didn't match her real lifestyle, bank statements that didn't add up, snippets of drunken voice notes she sent Mason trash-talking sponsors she'd begged for free products. Mason made it easier than I expected. He bragged constantly about skimming cash from Dad's construction deals, laughing about how dumb clients were for trusting him. He left trails everywhere, fake invoices, secret accounts, coded texts, and I saved them all. Then there was Dad. He thought he was untouchable. For years, he'd hidden undeclared income and under-the-table deals, and I knew there had to be a paper trail somewhere. After weeks of digging, I found it buried in old emails he thought no one would ever check. Mom was different. Her power wasn't in money, it was in manipulation. She had this web of texts and emails where she bullied distant relatives, mocked their weight, their marriages, their kids, while painting herself as the martyr. I collected those too, knowing exactly how toxic they'd look in daylight. But gathering dirt wasn't enough, not for what I had in mind. I didn't want them exposed quietly. I wanted them to destroy themselves. That's when I remembered Ethan Reyes. Dad had ruined Ethan's life 3 years ago, firing him in front of the entire company at a charity gala, accusing him of theft. I'd been there that night. I remembered the way Ethan stood frozen, the humiliation on his face as security escorted him out. I tracked him down, unsure if he'd even talk to me. But when I told him who I was and what I wanted, something dangerous lit up in his eyes. "I've been waiting for this," he said. He handed me a flash drive evidence Ethan had kept all these years, emails proving Dad set him up, fake audits, secret off-book accounts Ethan was blamed for. It was dynamite. And I had the perfect stage to light the fuse. 2 weeks later, Harper announced the City Renewal Gala on her socials, an exclusive event hosted by Dad's company, packed with sponsors, politicians, influencers, and the kind of people obsessed with appearances. It was their big night. The night that was supposed to seal their status as the perfect golden family. I smiled when I saw the date. I wasn't just going to ruin their image. I was going to make them confess live in front of everyone who worshipped them. And by the time I was done, the very people who laughed while I bled would be crawling through the dust they once made me eat. The city renewal gala glittered like something out of a movie. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across a room filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and the soft murmur of power. Everywhere I looked, people in sleek suits and shimmering gowns smiled for cameras, toasting my father's visionary leadership. I stood near the entrance, hidden in plain sight, wearing the black gown Harper once mocked me for buying because it was too cheap to wear anywhere important. I'd had it altered, reshaped. Tonight, I didn't look like the quiet, broken shadow they thought they'd beaten into submission. Tonight, I looked untouchable. I watched them on stage, Mom glowing with her fake elegance, Dad soaking up attention like oxygen, Harper preening for the livestream cameras, and Mason throwing his arm around wealthy sponsors as if they were lifelong friends. Perfect. Exactly the way I needed them to be. The event hit its peak when Dad walked to the microphone, giving his signature family speech about resilience, hard work, and values. The crowd applauded like sheep, and my stomach twisted with bitter laughter. That's when I triggered the first step. The giant LED screens behind him flickered. For half a second, confusion swept the room, and then Harper's carefully curated Instagram photos appeared alongside screenshots of the emails where she mocked every brand she partnered with. "Cheap trash," one caption read. "Only idiots buy their products." Gasps echoed across the hall. Harper froze mid-pose, her eyes wide as her carefully crafted empire began to crumble in real time. The cameras kept rolling. And then Mason's invoices appeared. Fake numbers, fraudulent payments. And a photo Mason laughing at a bar, bragging about how he'd skimmed enough off Dad's deals to buy a new jet ski without anyone noticing. I saw Dad's face twitch, his hand gripping the podium so tightly his knuckles went white. Mason spun toward him. "You knew about this!" Mason hissed, loud enough for the front row to hear. "Don't you dare look at me like—" "I knew nothing," Dad snapped, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Oh, please," Harper barked, finally breaking character. "You taught us how to cheat, Dad. Don't act so innocent." The microphones were still live. Everyone heard. The sponsors started whispering among themselves. Phones were buzzing, notifications lighting up faces in the crowd. I knew what they were seeing. Ethan and I had timed it perfectly. The drive I'd sent earlier contained every last email proving Dad's tax fraud, every shady deal he buried under shell companies. It was already trending on Twitter under #GoldenFamilyExposed. I watched Dad's phone vibrate nonstop, his expression morphing from confusion to panic to rage. "This is you!" he snarled at Harper, jabbing a finger in her face. "You ruined us!" "Oh, screw you, Dad!" Harper spat back. "This is your mess, not mine!" Sponsors started walking out. Camera crews captured every second. Guests whispered loud enough for my parents to hear. Fraud. Liars. Thought they were untouchable. Mom's perfect composure finally cracked. "Stop fighting!" she hissed, grabbing Dad's arm. "We can fix this if we stay united." But Mason shoved Harper. Harper shoved him back, and suddenly the four of them were tearing into each other under blinding stage lights, screaming, accusing, dragging every hidden betrayal into the open while hundreds of people watched. Exactly as planned. And then came the final blow. The doors at the back of the hall swung open, and Ethan Reyes walked in. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People remembered what my father had done to him. Ethan didn't say a word. He didn't have to. His presence was enough to make Dad stumble over his own words, sweating under the spotlight. The humiliation was complete. The once untouchable family was crumbling live, every camera broadcasting it to thousands watching from home. By the time the live stream cut, their legacy was dust. But I wasn't finished. I stood in the hallway outside the gala hall, the muffled shouting of my family bleeding through the double doors behind me. The live stream had ended, but the storm was just beginning. My palms were damp, my chest tight, but I couldn't stop now. Tonight wasn't about humiliation alone. It was about taking away everything they had built on my pain. Ethan stepped beside me, his jaw tight, his tailored suit sharp as a knife. Years ago, my father had destroyed him, cheated him out of his company, mocked him publicly, and left him bankrupt while my family celebrated over champagne. Now, he was my silent partner, the ghost my parents thought they'd buried. "You ready?" he asked quietly. I nodded once. It's time. By the next morning, the world had already devoured the chaos from the gala. Harper's brand sponsors had terminated every deal. Mason's fraudulent invoices went viral on Twitter and LinkedIn, obliterating his business genius image overnight. Dad's name trended under #goldenfraud, while investigative journalists ripped apart every contract he'd ever signed. But my revenge wasn't just exposing them. I wanted them stripped of power. Ethan and I had spent months preparing for this. Through his network, he'd acquired controlling interest in the family's biggest source of pride, Reynolds Development Group, the company Dad used to wave like a trophy in everyone's faces. By noon, the takeover was finalized. By evening, their access cards no longer worked. I watched from the cafe across the street as Dad stormed up to the glass doors, yanking at the handle like a desperate man drowning. Security stopped him cold. "This is my company," he shouted. "Not anymore, Mr. Reynolds," the guard replied calmly. "Ownership transferred this morning. You'll need to schedule an appointment if you want access." The look on his face, God, I'll never forget it. Harper tried to salvage her influencer career by posting a video blaming me for everything, but she made a fatal mistake. Ethan had already fed every major gossip outlet unreleased clips of Harper mocking her own fans, laughing at the people who worshipped her online. Within hours, the comments under her posts turned rabid. Her follower count plummeted. Brands blacklisted her. Strangers called her fake, manipulative, garbage. Mason spiraled faster. His name hit every financial watchdog report for fraud. Loans called in, credit cards declined. His so-called friends stopped answering his calls the moment he lost his shine. And Mom, the woman who smashed a plate into my face, laughed while I bled and told everyone I was worthless dead weight. She begged me to meet her at the house. I went. The once spotless cold palace looked like a war zone, newspapers piled at the door, unopened bills stacked high on the counter, Mom sitting on the couch with hollow eyes. "You did this," she whispered, her voice cracked and thin. I crouched in front of her, meeting her gaze for the first time in years. "No, Mom," I said softly. "You did this. I just gave the world the receipts." The final nail came a week later at the quarterly city council meeting. For decades, Dad held that seat like a king on his throne, using it to secure contracts, favors, and status. But when the council voted unanimously to strip him of his position, thanks to Ethan presenting a mountain of evidence we'd collected, Dad walked out of that chamber pale, shaking, and utterly broken. I stood on the steps outside as he passed me, his eyes glassy with defeat. "You ruined us," he rasped. I smiled small, quiet but sharp. "No, Dad, I just gave you exactly what you gave me." They lost everything: the company, the money, the influence, the carefully constructed golden image. And Ethan? He now sat where my father once ruled, running Reynolds Development Group with a steady hand and quiet dignity. The man my parents humiliated now owned the empire they built on cruelty. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their love. I had something better. The power they thought I'd never have. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.